All right, well, welcome to the Applying to a Health Professions Program workshop sponsored by the Health Professions Advising Center at UCR. So we are glad that you're here this morning. We are going to spend some time walking through the application cycle. This is application season. Application season typically starts in the spring, although for some health professions, it actually even starts as early as the winter in January if you're looking at veterinary medicine. But generally speaking, in terms of when students start and submit their applications for health professions program, that starts in April, May, June, July. And for students who are applying this cycle, so it's May of 2021, you are applying for fall of 2022. So fall is typically July or August of 2022. And if you are watching this and you are not applying this cycle, that's fine as well. This is a great prep to get you to think about what you need to do in the future when you are applying to a health professions program. I'm Charlie Scrogson, the director of the Health Professions Advising Center at UCR, also known as HPAC, and our role on campus is to support students in advising, information sharing, and being able to get them where they need to be to decide if this is the right area for them, and then if so, to get them to be a competitive applicant so they're happy with what they're presenting to the health professions program of their choice. This workshop is for all health professions, so medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, optometry, and other health professions programs, not just medicine, although we have a large pre-med cohort at UCR. A lot of students want to go to medical school. This workshop is applicable for students in all health professions. Right, so I want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room, if you will, and that is COVID-19, the pandemic. We've been doing this for over a year now, and our students that were applying last spring, they were sort of at the front edge of this, and we really didn't know how this was going to work in terms of would students be applying on time? Would they be interviewing in person or remotely? Would they have to take the MCAT or the DAT or the GRE, or would those things be waived? So there were a lot of questions that students had. There were a lot of questions that pre-health advisors had. And over the past year, we've been able to sort a lot of those things out. But I still wanted to cover COVID because we still are in the pandemic. There are some things that have returned back to as they were prior to the pandemic. So in terms of applying and reporting courses, prerequisites, that type of thing, letters of recommendation, taking the entrance exam. But there are some things that are still haven't resumed or still up in the air, and that tends to fall more with shadowing, maybe some clinical experiences. There are some things where they're slowly starting to get back to normal, but by the time that students will apply this May or June, they may have not returned yet, or just returning to maybe a research experience they were having, or clinical experience, shadowing, that type of thing. And a question with that is, well, how do I report that on my application? Do I report that, I've been on a hiatus and I'm coming back, or do I not report it at all? So those are some of the things that I think is important to think about as you're moving forward. Health professions programs have either developed policies or developed language, or moved away from prior policies regarding certain things, clinical things, not all, but some, that they would have liked to see in applicants or on the application. So students, we found, instead of being shadowing or volunteering in person, they've been doing a lot of like e-shadowing or volunteering through, Zooming or social media or other platforms to engage patients, maybe either in a nursing home or skilled facility or assisted living or community center, people that were typically going out and getting that interaction, or you're going into their homes. Now you're doing it remotely, and schools are accepting that. So they're allowing e-shadowing, they're allowing what students have been doing to be creative, to get that community service connection or that clinical connection. They are accepting that. There are a lot of other programs such as dentistry or veterinary medicine or physician's assisting that have still held true that they want students to get inpatient experience for veterinary medicine. It's usually about 3,000 hours is what an applicant brings to the application cycle. For dentistry, it's about 100 hours, 50 hours in a general dentist office and 50 hours in a specialty office. And then for PA, it's about 2,000 hours of inpatient experience. So those health professions are still wanting students to have that experience. And if you're thinking, okay, well, that wasn't possible, there are a lot of folks that are in those roles now as EMTs or paramedics or phlebotomists or dental assistants or respiratory therapists or PTAs, physical therapy assistants. There's a lot of people that are currently working in the health professions that are using that experience to fulfill the requirements for their application. So again, looking at schools, looking at careers that you're interested in, just getting an idea of what their expectations were over the past year and what they're looking for applicants for fall of 2022. I always encourage students not to go too deep in terms of getting information for Reddit or Student Doctor Network. These are not official sources of information. They are blogs that are just thrown out there with opinions and ideas, but they're not really substantiated in terms of fact. They're not official. They're not put together by schools. So just be careful about information gathering from those resources. Last year, we talked a lot about being flexible. This year, I think that is also true, but I think things are coming back a little bit normal. Like we don't see that the MCAT's being canceled or the DAT. I mean, when things are opening up, they tend to still be open and remain open, but there may be some gray areas. And if those are things that you don't understand, you can always reach out to us in HPAC to help clarify that, or reach out to schools. So as you're looking at health professions programs, you may read something on their website, or you may hear something at a health professions fair or a conference, and it's okay if you don't understand or it's gray and you're not sure exactly how to act on that, to talk to the admissions personnel to get a better idea of maybe what's right for you. And then, as I shared, we are the Health Professions Advising Center is a constant source of information through our ambassadors, which Anthony is one of our ambassadors. So we have ambassadors that are available up until the end of spring quarter, advisors, so myself, our assistant director, Amber Nicholson, and then we have a graduate student assistant that's supporting students. We have a variety of workshops, events, and our website. We have a lot of things posted there. So we get our information from the sources. And so we always encourage students to work with HPAC to make sure you're getting the most accurate information. And if there's a question that you ask that we can't answer, we will go to the right source and get the answer for you, get back to you, and then allow you to move forward in your planning. So as I shared when we got started, this workshop is for students in all health professions. There are over 120 different health professions. So we tend to use examples and focus on the ones that are listed on the screen. But again, we support students in all health professions areas. Generally around application season, students are interested in the following. So the first two, allopathic medicine, that's MD, osteopathic medicine, that's DO, podiatry, dentistry, pharmacy, you can read down through the list. So that's where most of our students are applying. I would say public health listed at the end is probably one of our more popular areas of growth because of the pandemic and some of the other issues that students get acclimated or acquainted with or understand coming to UCR and the Inland Empire, and a lot of health issues that are in the area. They become interested in public health. And so they may look at public health as a primary career. They may want to pair that with being a physician, or maybe going into podiatric medicine or dentistry or another health profession school. When we talk about the application, you'll see that on the right side, a list of areas or topics that the application includes. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. The goal is to introduce you to these topics and that you have an idea of what's included in those areas, you gauging on how you would address these areas for yourself, and then having resources and places to go post today's workshop that you know that you can reach out to be more specific in those areas to support your application. So as I shared when we got started, this is officially application season, which starts in May, if you will, April or May. Amcas, which is for vet school, starts in January. That's one of the earlier applications that are opening. But in terms of it being application season, thinking about applying, thinking about personal statements, thinking about test, MCAT, DAT, PCAT, OAT, GRE, thinking about letters of recommendation, thinking about other secondary applications, other things within the application. This is generally the time of the year where that comes up. So you'll see in front of you, we have two columns that are that list dates, one with open and one with submission. So we show this because we want you to know when the application's open, and submission is when you can actually click submit, when you can have all of your information entered and is the first day to submit. This is not the deadline. So May 28th for Amcas is not the day that your application is due. It's the first day that you can hit submit. We don't show deadlines because we don't want you to focus on a deadline. Most health professions programs are rolling, and we'll talk about that over and over and over. You will hear that terminology fairly frequently in HPAC. So rolling is first come, first serve. We want you to apply early, not necessarily the first day when you can submit, but we want you to be earlier in the season or earlier in the summer, as opposed to later in the summer, August, September, in the fall, September, October. Those tend to be late. And I use those dates as an example because when you do look at the deadline, you'll see that August, September, October, November is typically the deadline for a lot of these programs. But again, that's late. So for us, and I'll say this over and over again, you'll see the submission date. That's the first day that you can actually submit, but we want you to be working on your application throughout spring quarter, maybe even into the summer, and have things ready to go by the time spring quarter grades are out. We really want you to include spring quarter grades in your application for a variety of different reasons. I also understand that UCR is a quarter school and that we generally finish about a month later than our semester schools. But again, the importance of you adding in your spring quarter grades into your initial application is really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So I wanted to put some context on like the application structure, because there are a lot of questions about that, rightfully so, because it is a really big deal. It is very, it's labor intensive. There's a lot of work for putting together an application for a health professions program, and there should be. This is not a job, it's a professional career. You are applying to something that's really major on a lot of different levels. And so because of that, there are a lot of different pieces that schools are asking from you. And we want to help you plan those out so that when you are applying, you again are preparing yourself to be a competitive applicant. So I talked a little bit about preparing early, and that's part of the reason that we do these workshops, that we start talking about this before the application starts. And I realized today, yep, we're in May. We actually had an application workshop earlier this quarter. We did some application pieces back as early as winter quarter in January when we were looking at the personal statement. So there are some things that we've been doing along the way to get students to think about applying when it's their term or their time to initiate this process. So we think about, again, the exam, the MCAT. Even though you may be taking it this spring, you have to plan in advance, either back last fall or maybe starting winter quarter to be preparing, figure out how you're going to prepare, self-prepare, or use an MCAT product or test product. Personal statement, thinking about, why do you want to be a physician? Why do you want to be a nurse? Why do you want to be a dentist? Why do you want to go to medical school or dental school or nursing school or podiatry school? Thinking about activities. What have you experienced? What do you still need to experience? Letters of recommendation, who are writing those? What are they writing? So those types of things are things that we want you to be thinking about very early on. All right. Part of the application process is getting, writing narratives, writing experiences, and then getting formal documents like transcripts, letters of recommendation. So I talked a little bit about waiting until spring quarter grades come in. Once they do, you request a transcript for yourself, you request a transcript for the application service that you're applying to. For medical school, it's going to be Amcas for MD schools and AACOMAS for DO schools. For dental schools, it's AADSAS. For vet schools, it's VMCAS. So each health professions portal or program that you're interested in, they all require transcripts. We'll get a little bit more in depth into that, but again, something for you to add to your list of things to do and address. Once you do apply, once you submit your application and once you submit your transcript, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. Most application services are located in Washington, D.C. And so once they get your application, you'll get a confirmation email that we've received it or they've received it. And that process will start with taking the courses that you've entered from the institution that you've entered at and the grade that you've entered and the units and matching that with a transcript or transcripts that you've sent in. So that's the formal part of being reviewed. It takes 4 to 6 weeks. And then once that process happens, then that application service or association will reach out to you and say that it's complete. And then schools that you're specifically interested in are available to get that information, and you can start the secondary school process, the secondary application process, which is very specific to each health professions school that you're applying to. And so that happens, and that generally takes 2 weeks from when you receive it to when you submit it, and you really get to decide, where am I applying, what schools are right for me. If I were to apply and get an interview, I would go to that interview. So those are the types of questions that you want to be asking yourself so you can get the application secondary in, reviewed, addressed to the questions or prompts that they're asking, and then back to the school. And once that happens, generally then it's you're up for committee review by the admissions committee. And then they decide if you're going to have an interview and when that's going to be. And that might be sooner, which is fall, early fall, mid-fall, late fall, or into spring. Interviews generally start in August and go through March. So somewhere in there, earlier is better to get your interview. But that process happens, you interview, and then hopefully you have an acceptance. And that can happen anywhere from October to March or April. And then you're set until school starts again in the late summer or fall of 2022. So that's just a snapshot of how the application cycle works. It's a long process, but I think we lay it out to where students can understand what happens when. It's just being organized, having a good calendar, and being focused on what you need to do now, and then looking straight ahead on the horizon about what are some of the next things coming up so that you're able to address those things as well. So that when it's time for you to apply, the key word or key phrase that we want you to believe in yourself is that you're a competitive applicant. That's what we want for you at the time of when you apply. So what do committees look for? What do health professions programs look for in their applicants? There's lots of ways to answer this question, but I typically will answer it in 2 or 3 ways because that's generally what they're looking for. So the academic ability is pretty straightforward. That's the coursework that you've taken, the grades that you've earned. And when we look at academics, we're looking at science and non-science. So your BCPM, biology, chemistry, physics, and math, that's often considered science coursework. It's upper div and lower div work, or lower div and upper div. It's all of it. And then in a sub area of that, they're also going to be looking at your prerequisite courses that are required for that health professions program. And then the standardized exam would be MCAT, DAT, PCAT, OAT for your respective health professions program. So academic ability is number one. And then number two is experiences. So experiences are very wide in terms of, it could be clinical, so it could be health related. It could be within that, could be shadowing, could be volunteering, could be a part-time job, could be full-time. So they're not just current college students applying to health professions programs. There's physical therapists, there are respiratory therapists, there are dental assistants, there are EMTs, there are paramedics, there are people in research. I'm currently working with a high school chemistry teacher who's applying. And then there are post-bac students, there are students taking gap years, and then there are traditional college age leveled students that are juniors and seniors. So that's kind of the mix of everybody who's applying to health professions programs. So you've got the clinical experiences, you've got service, that could be community service, could be service to your country, our vets who are applying as well, are folks that have military service. There are research, undergraduate research, graduate research, part-time research, full-time research. We have folks that are working at biotech labs that are applying, clubs and organizations, could be pre-health focus, could be civic focus, could be Greek life, fraternity, sorority, could be service to the community, and then everything that falls in between, etc. So could be, you are a yoga instructor, I had a student who was a clown at a circus, and he wrote about that. There's a lot of hobbies that you might want to include in your application. So your experiences are pretty wide. It's really, what do you deem that you do that you want to share with an admissions committee? And then personal attributes. And that's something that we've added because we think it's really important for you as a future applicant to think about some of these areas that come from your writing in your experiences and in your essays, through your experiences, in your personal statements, and in your letters of recommendation. So when you think about faculty who are writing about you and your work in their course or their lab, or an advisor, an academic advisor, or a supervisor, a volunteer supervisor, a job supervisor, they're going to be writing about the key competencies that are listed under personal attributes. And schools do look at those. They want to know, are you a leader? Not necessarily, were you an officer in a club? We're not looking solely at being a president or vice president or secretary or an executive board officer. We're looking at leadership, maybe in a club, but maybe in a classroom, or maybe in a group. Communication, verbal communication, written communication, cultural competency. Have you worked in a variety of different areas or volunteered? When I think of cultural competency, I think of UCR being a very cultural melting pot. Our students are exposed to a lot of different things at UCR and in the Inland Empire community. So I'm not saying just because you're at UCR, just because you're from the area or that you're from California, that's something that is a strength for you. But generally speaking, it's not something that I have to really worry about with our students. Professionalism, compassion, things that you see that are listed here are all things that are very important to health professions programs and careers in general. But if you think about what health providers do and in their work in terms of working with other clinicians or in the community with other professionals, with other leaders, and then most certainly patients and their families, these attributes are really important to have. And so when you're thinking about, again, applying and you're wanting to know what do committees look for, keep in mind these three areas: the academic ability, so courses that you've taken, the grades that you've earned, your standardized exam, so looking at assessment in the MCAT or the DAT or the GRE, which does not measure science, your clinical experiences, your social experiences, your work experiences, your service, your hobbies, and then personal attributes, things that maybe you espouse or competencies that you hold and other people have described them in letters of recommendation, or you've written them in your personal statement or responses to some of the experiences that you've had in your application. I wanted to show you what it looks like to be a national applicant. So we don't show this to intimidate students, but we show you because this is the data that's provided to us in the Health Professions Advising Center in terms of nationally who applies in these areas. So again, there are over 120 different health professions, but we've pulled out the more frequent or more common professions that our students apply to at UCR. And so you'll see that, nationally, there were over 50,000 people that applied to medical school last year, at least in the MD application series for Amcas and the allopathic schools, and almost 21,000 for osteopathic. So the key thing there to know is that many of our students apply to MD and DO schools. So this data is not correlated in terms of there were just 51,000 that are applied to allopathic, but didn't include DO. They don't cross those here. So a lot of those are the same applicants that wanted to apply to both MD and DO schools. Generally speaking, that's the only time that students are going to be applying to 2 application services. If you're interested in dentistry or pharmacy or optometry or other health professions programs, we think it's only best for you to be applying to those professions, not applying to dental school and pharmacy school at the same time. So you need to pick one, and that needs to be your area of focus. I say generally speaking because also we do have students that might be applying to MD schools through Amcas, DO schools through AACOMAS, and Caribbean schools, which do not have an application service. Or students may be applying to nursing programs through nursing CAS, but also individually through nursing schools. So, we want you to feel comfortable in the area that you're looking at. And if you're not, then we want to talk a little bit about that. Sometimes we do have students that have applied to medical school last year, and then through the application process and through maybe additional shadowing, or connecting with a health provider, they decided, oh, I want to go to podiatry school. I'm really interested in surgery. I know that is a way that I'm going to be able to be a surgeon. I'm okay that it's a foot and ankle surgeon. And so maybe they decide I'm going to apply to podiatry school because it is the same prerequisites. You do need the MCAT, you do need letters of recommendation, you do need shadowing and clinical experience, and sometimes that will happen. But generally, that's having an advisor meeting and talking about some of your interest and how you want to move forward there. I also just want you to take a look at the 2 columns regarding GPA, so you have a cumulative GPA and a science GPA. That's going to be true for most health professions programs. Your cumulative is either everything together, science and non-science, or it could be just non-science. But cumulative is everything. So that's courses that you may have taken out of community college, maybe at another 4-year UCR. It may go toward your major, it may not. If it's a course on a transcript, it's going to be calculated and evaluated, and generally it falls under cumulative, everything. Your science GPA is determined by the program that you're applying to. So medical schools have a way that they calculate your science GPA. Dental schools have a way they calculate your science GPA. PA programs have a way that they calculate your science GPA. So we think it's really important that the application or the profession that you're applying to, you should also proactively, or before you start the application process, calculate your GPA. We want you to know where you are before starting the application process, because you will not get your GPA until you've submitted, you've paid, and then it takes that 4 to 6 weeks review, and then they'll send you a verified application with your GPA. So we have a GPA calculator that's on our website. It's on the front page. If you go to hpac.ucr.edu, I'll even have Anthony posted in the chat the link to the website or to the Excel document, and you can go in and you can create your own spreadsheet. Just add in the courses, click if it's a science or non-science course, and that will help you figure out where you are in terms of GPA. So again, we just do this as a way for you to have an understanding of your competitiveness. And if you're there, great. And if you're not, then we can utilize that tool to help you move forward. So thank you, Anthony. All right, so this is what the application process looks like. There are a couple of different areas. And so we have this laid out so you can visually see that. As I said earlier, it's pretty comprehensive. There's a lot of stuff from personal and biographical information, which you can just type that in pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time. And then you go to transcripts and coursework and GPA, and that's a lot more involved because you're listing courses individually. You're listing, are they a science or non-science? You're listing the number of units, the grade, when you took the course, what year, what quarter. And generally students don't really understand that until they get into the application process and wow, you have to enter every course exactly how it's listed in a transcript. Yes, you do. So it's not something that you're going to really work on right before you go to bed. It's not like a last minute thing. This is something that you're going to spend quite a bit of time working on. And generally for all the sections that we have listed here, on average, it takes students about a month to complete the application to where they like it, where they feel good about it, and they're ready to send it off. So you can read the other tabs. We do provide support with activities and personal statement and letters of recommendation. We have workshops there. We also have a secondary school workshop, and those are all located on our YouTube channel. And so you can click on and watch those. And by the time that you've went from our office in terms of watching this, the application workshop, to the personal statement workshop, to the secondary application workshop, to the letters of recommendation workshop, you should be really well-versed in application language and knowledge. Maybe not an expert, because this might be the first time that you're actually starting this process, but the resources that we have for you are pretty layered. They're in detail, and you should have an idea if it's right for you right now, and if so, what's the timeline and what should you be doing when to get yourself to that competitive application status and timeline. So personal and biographic information, as I shared, that's pretty easy to navigate. So I don't generally spend a lot of time here. And these are pretty basic questions on most application pieces at the very beginning. We do spend a lot of time talking about transcripts and coursework because we get a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty or misinformation regarding this area. And some of it is rightfully confusing because how maybe we work as an undergraduate institution to prepare you for your major and your degree is maybe a little bit different of what health professions programs want. So I'll give you an example. If you went to UCR your whole entire time, it's pretty easy. You are getting a transcript from UCR, you're entering that into the application, and you're good to go. If you transferred, if you were at a community college or another four-year institution, what you know is that the credit came over from that institution, but the grades didn't. And so you started at UCR maybe as a sophomore or a junior, but you had a 0 GPA until you completed your first term. For health professions programs, they factor in all coursework, whether it was relative to the health professions or not, or whether it's relative to your major or not. So maybe you went to a community college for 2 years and you took general courses and maybe you were a psychology major. And then you came to UCR and decided, I'm an anthropology major and I'm going to take science classes through CNS. Well, all of that work is going to count, no matter whether it went toward your major or not. All schools are going to evaluate all of that community college work and all of your work at UCR, and they're going to factor in those grades from the community college or any other institution that you were at beside UCR, as well as UCR. So everything counts, whether it went toward your major or maybe you were in high school and you took a tennis class. That transcript still has to come, it still has to be evaluated, it still has to be entered into your application. Okay. When you are requesting transcripts, the best piece of advice that I can give you is request 2 from each institution. So you have one for yourself to enter into the application, and then one that goes from the institution directly to the application service. It never passes your hands. It goes from UCR to Amcas or UCR to AACOMAS. I talked a little bit earlier about the importance of waiting until spring grades. That's really important so that they see that spring term and that you're not individually writing every medical school or health professions program post your application to share that information.
Charlie, quick question.
Yep.
So you mentioned the 4 to 6 weeks to verify. Is that also for e-transcript deliveries or only through mail deliveries?
It's also for e-transcript. That's a great question. So once the application service gets your application and transcript, it's 4 to 6 weeks. In the past, if you were requesting a transcript from UCR and maybe other institutions, they would ask for 10 days for processing. So that was 10 days plus 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so that 4 to 6 weeks, it's a great question. That timer starts once the schools get your application and transcript, because they need both to review together. Good question.
Thank you.
So they'll look at all of that. They'll have the application, they'll have the transcript, they'll make sure that it was filled out correctly. If it wasn't, they actually will make adjustments to your application to essentially align it with the transcript. So your transcript is an official university document. It's the word. Like everything that's on that transcript is considered like the gospel, if you will, regarding your academic record. So they have to follow exactly what says on that document. So I bring this up because I've had students in the past reach out to me to say, oh, I earned an A in this Psych 1 class, and my professor is going to change it, but right now it says a C. Well, that C is getting calculated. That A that you earned is not official. So if it's on the transcript at the time that you're submitting it, you got a C, and that's what's going to be factored in. Okay, so anytime that you have an incorrect grade, you have a grade that's missing, it might say GB, which stands for grade delay, that needs to be fixed before it's submitted, or it won't get fixed. Because once you submit that transcript, there are no changes for that application cycle. It's done. You pay that fee one time, it goes from you to Washington, DC to the schools, and you're on to the next stage. There's not really any going backwards. For courses that are withdraws or repeats or an S&C or C-, all of that gets factored in. So if it's a withdraw, it's a W, it's not punitive. An S and C is our equivalent to pass or fail. It's not punitive. A C- would get reported. If you had earned a D or F and you retook the course, that also gets reported. So anything that you've taken, even if you have to repeat the course, all of it gets reported and averaged. Okay, so again, that's some of the questions that we get, or there's confusion because UCR doesn't factor in first attempts. Maybe you took Bio 5A, got a D, took it again and got an A. The D and A are both on your transcript, but the D is not factored into the weight, only the A is. But for the application services for health professions, they'll go back and factor in the D. So all grades, S&Cs, withdraws, that all gets put on there. And again, withdraws, S&Cs don't have a negative grade weight. They're just placeholders for that course. So this is just a snapshot of what it looks like in Amcas if you were to have a transcript in front of you and you started filling out your application specific to the courses that you've taken, the course title, the grade, the units. We say units. Some application services will say hours, credit hours. And so your academic year would be, like we right now are in the 2020-2021 academic year. What's the term? We right now are in spring of 2021. Year in school. Are you a freshman? Are you a sophomore? Are you a junior? Are you a senior? Are you a post-bac? Course number. So I used BIOL 5A would be for the first quarter of biology. Course name, you would write in the title exactly as it's listed on the transcript. Course classification, it's science. And so, Anthony, if you would, please, will you put in the chat, would you Google AAMC course classification guide? This is a great tool to have so that you can be informed of how courses are categorized in terms of science and non-science. So Anthony will put that in the chat, but just to kind of help make sense out of it. Again, I said science is biology, chemistry, physics, and math. So under biology, we have a very large biology department at UCR. So we know like the bio series, the 5 series, because that's a prerequisite for a lot of our health professions programs, but genetics would fall under there. Entomology would fall under there. Neuroscience would fall under there. CMDB would fall under there. Microbiology would fall under there. Immunology would fall under there. So those are all considered biology courses. Anything in the biology department would fall under that area. Okay.
So the credit hours, is that referring to semester or quarter or either?
Both, either. Yep. So good question. So they want to know, did you take this on quarters or semesters? So if you put semesters, they're probably going to be looking for 2 classes. But if you put quarters, they're going to be looking generally for 3. And if we don't have 3, which we do for us, but if there were ever this question, they would go to the course catalog, the UCR course catalog. They can Google that and they can pull that up. So they would look for that. And then you'll see also under that, it says, did the course include a lab? Okay. So for most of our prerequisite courses, bio, chem, OChem, physics, you have to have a lab, right? So they want to know, was that the lecture only, or was it the lab only, or was it combined? And that's really important because if you, again, go to our bio 5 series, you've got 5, and then you've got, or 5A and 5LA. So those are 2 separate courses. You would mark one as lecture only and one as lab only. But then other courses where they're built together, it would be a combo, lecture and lab. Okay. So you have to be really specific and thoughtful, because think about all the colleges and universities across the United States. And this one office in Washington, D.C. is processing everybody's application for the 145 to 47 MD schools in the United States. So you really need to be specific. You need to have a clear mind when you're going through this. And quite honestly, you don't want to submit an application with a lot of mistakes, because you don't want the medical school to see all the corrections that Amcas has made, because then you're not going to look like a very competitive applicant, right? You want to try to get this as correct as possible the first time. All right. So we talk a lot about GPA calculations, probably to ad nauseum, but it's really important for you to know where you stand before you start the application process, so that you can decide, yep, I want to apply right now, or maybe I need to apply next year, or I'm a sophomore and I have a year to develop goals and get where I want to be. So here I am as a sophomore, spring quarter, I'm going to be taking summer classes or not, but fall, winter, and spring, I'm going to be working really hard. I'm going to be developing goals so that when I apply next May or June of 2022 for fall of 2023, I'm going to be where I want to be, and I'm going to feel like a competitive applicant. Okay, so cumulative, I've already defined that. That's all courses taken, every college or university, whether it went to your major or not. And then science is generally biology, chemistry, physics, and math. And again, Anthony put the spreadsheet in the chat for you to take a look at, set that up. If you have a Mac and you're having trouble, it looks a little wonky, then an idea is you can create one just for science classes, and that's all you're putting in, or you can create 2, one for science and one for non-science. And we're using this as a benchmark. So it's not anything that you have to type into the application system. Like I've self-averaged a 3.5 or 3.7. This is solely for you to know this is where you are right now. And are you applying right now? Or are you going to be applying in the future? And if so, then you can also add in courses and grades that you hope to earn to kind of benchmark where you're going to be in the future at the time of application. So I wanted to talk a little bit about standardized exams. Most health professions programs do require some type of standardized assessment. We know for medicine, it's the MCAT. It's also the MCAT for podiatry, and I talked a little bit about that earlier. Sometimes students, they've applied to medical school, or they decided, I really want to go into surgery, and that's not a guaranteed residency in medicine. But if I go into podiatry, it is guaranteed, because podiatrists, foot and ankle doctors, and surgeons have to study and train in the residency program in surgery. And if you are looking at dentistry, that's the DAT, which is similar to the MCAT. Pharmacy is the PCAT, and optometry is the OAT. So these are the primary science exams that students will take for the respective health professions programs. If you're interested in veterinary medicine, physical therapy, occupational therapy, public health, PA, nursing, those programs, if they require an exam, it's going to be the GRE. So most vet schools do require the GRE. Most physical therapy programs require the GRE. Occupational therapy, it just depends. Public health, it just depends. And PA, it's like half. So doing a little bit of research before taking these exams is really helpful. Sometimes we have students who've taken the MCAT and they'll ask, can I use this to apply to vet school or PT school or PA school? And the answer is generally no. So most programs, if they require the GRE, even though the MCAT does assess your science knowledge, it's not like we'll take generally this or that. There may be a few programs that do that, but generally speaking, no, it's like we have this exam and that's how we evaluate all of our applicants together. So when you do take your exam or when you're planning to take your exam, you really want to know or strongly believe you're going to do well. So I know that we're in May right now. We'll be specific to where we are in the spring, that we have a lot of students that are wrapping up or they're in the middle of spring quarter, week 6, and they are planning for their summer. They're going to finish the term and they're going to take the MCAT this summer. And so they're thinking ahead and they may be applying this summer as well. We want you to have some sort of assessment in place, full-length practice tests, to guide you to believe that if you were to take the exam in June or July, that you would do well. You don't want to set this up where I'm hoping I'll do well and let's just do this as a practice test, because these scores, even though they only may be good for, let's say, 3 years, they're on your record forever. So you want to make sure that when you take the exam, you're ready to go. And doing that is doing some self-assessment and then doing a Kaplan course or Princeton Review or exam crackers. We don't have any specific preference in our office other than you finding something that's right for you. The AAMC has a lot of materials. Khan Academy is free. So there's a lot of materials out there. What's right for you? Okay. Activities.
I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit. In regards to the transcripts and inputting grades, AP credits should also be inputted.
Correct. If it's on the transcript. Yep. So if it's on the UCR or college transcript, whether it's AP or IB, International Baccalaureate, it still has to be reported.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. And there are no grades associated with that. So it's just the credit. And then you would click AP and they'll see that that's AP credit. Okay. Great question. All right, let's talk about activities. So activities are a significant part of the application. And so for Amcas and other application services, they give you the opportunity to list your activities. So you'll see here, I'm going to just have you take a second to look at the activities that I have on this on the screen. And we'll just take a second. I want you to look at those, and then I'm going to be a little more specific about what those look like. Okay, so for activities, it's a really important part of your application. We talked a little bit before about what activities involve. So it could be clinical pieces, volunteering, shadowing, research, service, clubs and organizations, part-time work, full-time work. Everything is that I just shared is put under activities, which is a really big section. You think of activities, you don't really think of part-time, full-time work. You don't really think of maybe, winning an award of some sort, or being, a National Merit Scholar or Rhodes Scholar or Bill and Melinda Gates scholar, but that all follows or falls under activities. And activities is an area where you can decide what you want to put there. So as you can imagine, being a co-pal scholar, being an EMT, being a phlebotomist, participating in a School of Medicine pipeline program, undergraduate research, being an HPAC ambassador. There's a lot of things that students want to list. You don't have to list the maximum amount. This is about quality, not quantity. 15 is a lot. And again, that's not what the expectations are, especially as a college student. You have to be mindful that people who apply to medical school, it can be anybody. So these could be people who, have been in military service or who have worked a variety of different jobs. They're career changers, or they want to advance in their career. So again, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of what you've done. And with these activities, they're going to be asking, well, what is the activity? When did you start? Are you currently there? When are you wrapping up, or have you wrapped up? Who's a contact person that could speak on your behalf? I wouldn't go as far as calling it as a reference, but potentially it could be, especially if you listed them as a contact person and a letter writer, and a school wanted to reach out to that person to ask questions on your behalf. Then they're fulfilling a dual role there. With each of these activities, you're going to be asked to write a description. So there's different examples and different feedback that advisors or other people in the field will give. I generally encourage students to write a description almost like a job description. I know that some people think that that might be boring, but if you are describing, let's say, a co-pal scholar outside of the Inland Empire or Southern California, people don't know what that is. Like, what's a co-pal scholar? People don't know that you are basically a patient care assistant. And so you need to help them understand, almost as if you're doing a CV or a resume. I was a co-pal scholar at Riverside Community Hospital. And as a co-pal scholar, as a health scholar, I was responsible for these things, and you're filling those out. And you could write them as bullet points, you could write them as sentences, but they need a job description. What did you do there? And if that was considered a most meaningful experience, so in the American Medical College Application Service, Amcas, they allow you to pick 3 activities that are most meaningful. Then you can provide a narrative. You can provide why that was meaningful, why that was life-changing. Maybe that was the impetus of you deciding to go to medical school or dental school or go into health professions. So share that, give that information, give that narrative, and you're going to have a really, large space. You have 1,325 characters, almost double the amount of space that you gave as a description. You're going to be able to double that in space if that's important to you, to describe why that was meaningful to you. So there you're giving, this is what I did, this was the job, the task at hand, and this is what I learned, how it made me feel, why I've decided to go into healthcare or the health profession of interest that you're applying to. Okay. So there's a lot of work with activities. We spend a lot of time talking to students about this, or a lot of questions. And you'll see in the applications, they have them laid out about expectations of what you list and how to fill that out. We're happy to do that. But I want you to be thinking about this part because we want you to adequately represent yourself. And that's sometimes thinking, well, what I learned, what I did, because this is where, again, you have a lot of play in your application. You don't really have a lot of play on your transcripts, but you do in this next area, which is what activities or jobs or responsibilities have you had, probably post high school. We want to keep it from maybe the summer after high school, freshman year of college, all the way up to where you are right now, or where you're going to be at the time of starting a health professions program, maybe next fall. All right.
Charlie, when the admissions committee is reading the application, the way that it's set up when it's printed, the activities come before the personal statement, Is that also the same way that the admissions committee would read the application?
Not necessarily. So the application comes in from the application service, and it's up to the school how they want to review that. Some admissions committees, they will put the entire application together. Some, they may only, the admissions office may take care of the grades and the MCAT score or the test score. And then the committee may only see the personal statement, the essays, the activities, and letters of recommendation. So there's no format that we can say that all schools follow this format. So, good question. Another piece in addition to the activities, which can be related to the activities or not, is the personal statement. So the personal statement is a defined area where, again, you have a lot of autonomy of what you want to share. Students will share, applicants will share, activities, personal experiences that involve themselves or maybe family members. It may have to do with health, personal health, or the healthcare system in which they grew up or they were surrounded by. And this is really open. So your personal statement is really sort of your canvas within parameters of usually characters or word limits, where you are able to systematically write to all schools, because everybody's going to see your personal statement, no matter whether you're applying to UCR, UCLA, or Ohio State, or Weill Cornell Medical College. It's all standard structured within the application. So you're writing in the fact that every school that you're applying to is going to see the personal statement. And then the secondary application, which we'll talk a little bit later, is more specific to schools. So we have a lot of resources in our office to help you get your personal statement going. We also have one more personal statement workshop coming up this quarter. It's on May 20th. We've already had one. So if you're available May 20th and you want to participate in a live workshop with a personal statement focus, you can do that. We also will offer it in the summer, but I try to encourage students to attend as early as possible, so you can start brainstorming and thinking, getting some help with that. Most health professions programs require a personal statement. So medicine, PA, veterinary medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, they all want to know, tell us about why you're interested in this field, or how you've decided that this career is right for you. Letters of recommendation is another significant part of the application. Most programs do request or require letters of recommendation. Generally, it's 3 to 5. For many programs, it's 2 in the sciences. So 2 science faculty, again, biology, chemistry, physics, and math. So it could be from Bio 5 series, it could be from genetics, it could be from organic chemistry, it could be biochemistry, it could be statistics, it could be calculus, it could be physics, it could be immunology, it could be CMDB courses. It's really open as long as it's in one of those science areas. Schools also want the letter to be from somebody who's taught you in a course. So they've evaluated you. It can be a professor, it can be a graduate student, a PhD student, that's fine as well. It should not be a peer, it should not be somebody from the AARC or an HPAC ambassador. This is somebody that's in a different level as you, that they are either teaching you or evaluating you. Research letters are research letters. They're not always science faculty letters unless you either received a grade in that research experience, or within your research experience, you also took a class with that person. So I'm thinking like Professor Cardulo or Professor Saltzman, or other faculty that do research, undergraduate research, and have students in their courses. Those are really great letters because they're evaluating you in a research environment as well as in a course. You can also get letters from faculty in humanities or social sciences. Maybe you've taken classes in public policy or CHAS or GSOE or BCOE or in the School of Business. Those can also be helpful, but they don't replace science letters. And then you'll want to have a letter, or it's a good idea to have a letter from somebody that you shadowed or somebody in the field. like a dentist or a pharmacist or a physical therapist, somebody who is a clinician. They do this day in and day out. You are involved with them, and they're able to speak about how you worked with patients. Some of those attributes that we talked about earlier, your communication, maybe your critical thinking skills. Did you ask good questions? Did you show up on time? Are you the type of person that I would want as my physician, dentist, pharmacist, physical therapist, fill in the blank? Okay. It's really important that your letter writers know you. You don't want to just hand them a resume and say, will you please write a letter for me? You can hand them a resume and transcripts along with, yes, I've been in your course or courses, or we worked together in advising, or you were a mentor for me or my advisor or whatever. But it shouldn't be you setting up a meeting saying, I'm going to lay out the things that I want you to know to write a letter. That's not going to work. This is, I've known the student over a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year span. They were in 1, 2, 3 of my classes. They were an ambassador for a year or 2 years. They shadowed me for 50 hours, 100 hours, 150 hours. They were a volunteer in this clinic over the past 2 years, 3 years. You'll see that I'm not saying that this was over 1 quarter, over maybe a holiday break. It could be a summer experience, but if it's a summer experience, oftentimes it was 8 to 5, 9 to 5, full-time, 40 hours a week, and you were able to build that relationship and that continuity. The AAMC has a resource called Guidelines for Writing a Letter of Evaluation. And Anthony, I'm going to have you post that in the chat if you'll Google that and post that link. That's really helpful for you to see what schools are looking for from their letter writers. So if you take a look at that, or if you have somebody who's writing a letter for you, maybe they're not a faculty member. Faculty letter members know how to write letters, but somebody that may have not written a letter or they don't do it frequently, this could be a really great resource to share with them, because this is what schools are looking for. And even though this is from the Association of American Medical Colleges, it's applicable for all health professions, dentistry, pharmacy, podiatry, it doesn't matter, because they're all looking for the same thing. Letters of recommendation are, as I said, really important. They get sent from the writer to the application service, or from the writer to Interfolio, which supports application services. They should not come directly to you. They should be written on university letterhead or stationery that's affiliated with the hospital or the unit or the organization in which you've worked with them. There should be contact information. So the writer should have, their name, their position, their email address, their phone number, maybe their physical location, but definitely phone number, email address is really important. And again, those get sent from the writer directly to the application service or into Interfolio that gets uploaded into the application service. Generally, you aren't seeing those letters. If you do, okay, the writer has shared that with you, that's fine. You haven't, broken any rule or policy, but it can't come from you. It has to come from the letter writer. All right, let's talk a little bit about selecting schools. I think it's really important that when you're looking at schools that you do a little bit of research to find out why you're applying there. You don't want to make a decision of, I'm applying to dental school this year and I'm going to apply to every dental school in the US, or I'm applying to medical school and I'm just going to apply to every medical school. A, you'll be exhausted. B, you'll never finish the secondary application. And C, you'll be broke. So it's rather expensive to apply to these health professions programs. There are things that we'll talk about that you can apply for. So if cost is an issue, there are programs with certain health professions associations that you can apply for. But generally speaking, kind of have to go into this thinking this is a costly process. It shouldn't stop you from applying, but just knowing that there has to be some methodology to what you're doing, because you cannot apply to every school. So I encourage students to look at mission statements. What are schools looking for? What are their interests? How do they want to train their providers? looking at academic pieces, profile, so GPA and score, test score. Location, do you want to stay in Southern California? Do you want to go to Northern California? Do you want to be across the US? You're applying nationally. Maybe you have 10 schools that you're looking at from coast to coast. Curriculum type, that's more traditional, so lecture versus problem-based learning. So, looking at situations, illnesses, and looking at issues with the body, and then learning about the body from there, looking at cases, doing case studies, that type of thing. So there's different types of models that schools use to educate and train their health providers. Public versus private, in-state versus out-of-state. There's differences there. Obviously, we know in-state versus out-of-state, what that means. Public and private, though, the difference with that is a lot of public schools, their mission is to accept students in their state. So if you look at California, you're going to find that a lot of our schools, not all, but a lot of our public schools, they want to train California residents. Private schools, generally, it doesn't matter. They take students from 50% out of state and 50% in state. Oftentimes that's the breakdown because their school is really funded on tuition. Those schools tend to be more expensive. And then you'll find that some public schools don't accept students from out of their state, or a very few. So if you look at the University of Washington, which is in Seattle, you'll see that they don't accept California residents. They are focused on Washington state and other states that are around them: Idaho, Alaska, Wyoming, Oregon, Utah, that don't have as many medical schools. But some of the other health professions programs like pharmacy, it's not as big of an issue. So looking at schools, looking at where they're located, their size, their cost, their academic structure, it's really important, I think, for you to feel like, yep, I'm going to fill out the secondary application. I'm going to pay that fee. If I get an interview, I'm going to interview there. And if I get an offer, it's a realistic offer for me to contemplate going to that school. So once you've submitted your primary application, we're going to take a step back. It's hard for you to make any changes. So you will hear us over and over. It's really important to think about this. It's important to work on this. It's important to be thoughtful, to work with an advisor, to talk to faculty, to get as much information in your application as you can. Not all application services, and this is really toward MD and DO, allow you to make changes. Some of the other programs do: dentistry, PA, nursing. It's a little bit easier to make changes there. Optometry, occupational therapy, but for medicine, they don't, because of the number of students who apply. So there's a lot of students that are applying to schools. UCR, for example, gets over 6,000 applications for 77 seats. So it's really hard to go back and make changes to applications once they've been submitted and verified. So that's why we want you to take care of all that you can upfront. Okay, so knowing that the timeline to apply is really this spring and summer, we want to make sure that you're organized and structured in a way that you're able to get those things taken care of so you can apply this summer before you come back in the fall or before you move on to your next thing. After the primary application, you have the secondary application, and that's specific to schools. We also have a secondary application workshop on our YouTube channel that we did last year with 2 UCR alumni, Max and Christian. I think they did a great job. They were 2 students that worked very closely with our office that applied to several schools, had a lot of success with that. And I worked with Max, Amber worked with Christian, and they both, the way that they approached the secondaries, we thought they did a fantastic job and were really thoughtful about what their future goals were and how they reviewed medical schools and approached that process. So we had them develop their structure of how they went about the secondary process, and we recorded that, and that's there for you to watch at any time before you start the secondary process. So secondary applications generally come directly from the school. They usually ask that you can complete them in 10 to 14 days, so it's pretty quickly. And you'll find once you start completing a secondary or other secondaries, you'll develop like boilerplate language. things that you can use for other secondaries. You just may have to be a little bit more specific to that school and how it might apply. But you'll find that a lot of the secondary applications ask some of the same questions. So you'll complete that within 10 to 14 days. There's usually a fee that's associated with it. You'll return it back to the school, and they'll hold on to it, and they'll tell you the next steps after that's reviewed with your primary application. So we know that in this process, that's, as I've shared throughout this presentation, that there's a lot that goes into the application. It's truly not rocket science. It just takes a long time. But if you're structured, you're organized, you take notes, which I think pre-health students are pretty good at doing, being organized, it's pretty easy to get through. It just takes time. So in addition to this, what we're providing in terms of this workshop, there are application instructions for each of the CASs, the centralized application services. So Amcas, AACOMAS, PharmCas, AADSAS, they all provide application instructions. They also provide video tutorials through YouTube. They have some things on Facebook, on Twitter. So it's worth checking out their social media. Oftentimes they'll do like little clips. They'll have students that are currently in the program talk about some of the things that they did or how they approached the application. So that's really helpful to follow them, and things that you may not necessarily find on their website. Because the school is in charge of that, you'll find more of the individual applicant or, FYI tips, if you will, on social media sites. So it's something you might want to check out. If you're taking a glide year or a gap year or a growth year, that's okay as well, as long as you have a plan. So, that plan might be studying for the test, might be working part-time or full-time, and shadowing or taking classes. So there isn't just like one thing or a couple of things. Students do different things for different reasons. And so if that's something that you're thinking about, you probably want to talk with an HPAC advisor just to make sure that, yep, I know what I need to do. I have a plan. Let's think about this. As a gap year or going through a glide year, if you're retaking classes, it's important to look ahead and find out where you might take those classes, what's the policy, the structure. Because if you think about what you're doing right now, if you're a current student, is that honor students register first, then seniors and juniors and so forth. And so you want to make sure that when you're doing some research into schools, you find out what's the likelihood of me being able to get the classes that I want or need. What does that cost look like? What's involved in each school? That way you can decide, yep, this institution works great for me. It's close to my house, or the one 20 miles away, even though it's a pain, it's 20 miles away, it works better for what I need. Okay. And so we're evaluating, why are you doing that? Courses, leadership, exam, are you working? Are you getting that experience? You need to be doing something in your growth or glide year, gap year, to make you again competitive for when you do apply. And last, I wanted just to share with you resources of health professions organizations. So whenever you're doing web research and you're looking for medical schools, MD or DO, you're looking at the application services, you need to be looking here, not at Student Doctor Network, not at Reddit. These are the official organizations that maintain medical school application services, dental school application services, the test, the MCAT. So the AAMC, the first that's listed there, they're charged with running the application system for MD schools. They also own the MCAT. They provide a lot of test prep, a lot of application assistance. They provide the financial assistance program. So if you're somebody who's really concerned about not being able to afford the application process to medical school, or even preparing for the MCAT, they have resources for you. So I want you to look here and our office as resources, because these are the legitimate resources. Sometimes when you Google things online, you get sort of taken off to a test prep company or another organization that wants to advise you. There's usually a cost with that. So we want to make sure that you're looking at the official organizations as well as our office, and then you have a good structure and foundation, and then you can decide how you want to move forward. Okay. So with that, we are about 12 minutes out, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. That way we can have some time to address any questions that you have. And I